Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 164 of ThROH The Years, the podcast that reviews Ring of Honor show by show from the beginning. My name is Trevor Dame. I'm joined, as always, by the co-host, Mr. Matt Feuerstein. Matt, how are you doing? We're in the hot season now. I did the classic summer podcaster strategy of running my air conditioning to make this place feel like an ice box, make it too cold, and then turn it off right before we start recording in the hopes that that will carry us through, or well, me through.
You and me both, sis. That's the situation that I'm in too. And not only is it another heat wave here in New York, but apparently we're getting another dose of your country's wildfire smoke.
Yeah.
Not that we don't have our own wildfires and wildfire smoke, but yeah, it's it's that time of year where you love being outside and also it's scary.
Yeah, it's great. If I traveled through time and um talk to my young child self and they want to know my future, I would try and hide basically all of it to not depress them. But the least depressing yet still depressing thing I would say is like 1 month a year for many years in the future, you will just smell like you have slept next to a campfire 24 hours a day. Like it just will not go away every summer, or many summers. Enjoy. So yeah, it's fun times.
Well, thank you for
I like
thank
that
you, thank
smell
you,
for a
thank
day or two.
But even if you know that it's not a campfire,
You know what? There was a fun if a wildfire. I can never say I'm happy for a wildfire, but there is kind of a fun novelty. Like I remember one of the first times there was a crazy wildfire near where I lived, and since I live in British Columbia, I live in especially a part of British Columbia where it is surrounded by trees, like most of British Columbia is, but it's also I live in like the driest, hottest part, so it's basically wildfire central here. But I remember the first time there was a wildfire nearby when I was like a teenager. My parents like drove with me. It was like a family field trip to go to like the outlying town so that we could look and watch like the hills on fire. It was
yeah,
like a fun field trip. And now I don't think anyone feels that way.
yeah. I mean, I feel like the wildfires as they get worse and worse, and actually, they've always obviously had devastating effects on people, but it's just more and more people seem to have extremely, be extremely, they have their lives extremely affected by these fires, and it, becomes much well beyond any sort of like novel news story and becomes, just real human tragedy and climate tragedy. And yeah, sorry for getting so heavy so early. I was just trying to make an offhanded comment, and I apologize for making it serious.
We were told that Bryan Danielson was going to listen for the first time onto this episode, so we tried to make a preamble more about the environment to kind of hook him in. So
I have heard he's the planet's champion. So I feel like
Bryan Danielson.
what's funny about Brian is that we talked about that in the Brian Danielson special, that whole era. But I feel like because his career was so vast and he had the AEW run shortly after that, that little run in his career where he like won best on promos or best on interviews in the Observer and had some very memorable matches, I feel like that's not going to be one of the more remembered parts of his career, which is kind of interesting because it was unique and very effective for the short time that it lasted.
I feel like wrestling has a couple of those in like relatively recent years where Danielson, and obviously a more severe version of this would be Roman Reigns with his leukemia, relapsing, his more slow form of it, needing him to take time away to deal with it again. Like Bryan Danielson he was having concussion-induced seizures, and he came back into wrestled, and Roman Reigns gave this, very emotional about how he had to step away. And both those guys, like, I feel like in a lot of athletes' history, that would be one of the most remembered central defining parts. And like you just saying that about Danielson, I was thinking, oh, that didn't happen that long, relatively speaking, after he came back. And that crazy arc where he came back from that, and then quickly, not long after that, he had been booked so crappily that to be like, oh, let's turn him heel. We got to freshen this guy up. And the same with Roman Reigns, where it was like, after that speech, people were thinking, well, he'll never get booed again. And that
Well,
changed.
that sort of might have been true, honestly.
Uh, I mean, there were like I think the boos changed. They got more hesitant, but he's still required eventually to really heat himself up. But again, I was just that's
I,
my
I'm
point.
I'm I more meant that he got cheered more than ever once he turned heel. That's sort of how what I
Well, yeah,
meant
that's
about
the thing.
Reigns.
Like you would think that just the health thing would finally get people on board, but it didn't. It'd be like I don't know if you know Lou Gehrig gave that speech and then he played for
Turn
like
and then
another decade somehow
and
and
turn
people forgot.
and then turned heel.
Yeah, he became Ty Cobb, and then he just. But yeah, it is crazy how a traumatizing health event and a dramatic comeback from that does not seem to necessarily guarantee like a milestone career-changing moment for you anymore. It gives you like a quick temporary boost that can quickly fade. It seems like.
Listeners, deep vein thrombosos, can you tell we need to pad this episode?
Yeah, so we only, in fact, this was one of the shorter Ring of Honor shows, and the next episode will be an even shorter show that we'll be watching, although there's a lot of news around that one. But there's only one news story that occurred between the last show and this show, and it's a great what if. I really have to thread the needle when I talk about this one. You'll see in a sec, Matt. I normally really try hard to source all the stories. For some reason, in my notes, I don't have the source here. I'm sure it's one of the major wrestling newsletters or news sites, but the story happened around this time. Just says, after being released by WWE, Teddy Hart made several overtures to ROH President Kerry Silkin about returning to ROH. I am told there are no plans to bring him in. Now, why I have to thread the needle is I wanted to say this the first night. I thought, that would sound bad. Obviously, today, knowing everything we know about Teddy Hart and the awful things he's been accused of, I would not suggest that any wrestling company bring him in. And quite frankly, in 2007, if I was friends of anyone that was promoting a wrestling promotion, even though it might have been enjoyable for me, I wouldn't have recommended to any wrestling promoter to bring Teddy Hart in because I would have never felt comfortable saying, hey, what'll make your life better? Having Teddy Hart as an employee. But I will say, I do think it's interesting what if in 2007 where we talk about how like the Vulture Squad didn't really pay off and wasn't really an exciting stable. I think if there's anything in 2007 that could have made the Vulture Squad kind of buzzworthy or buzzard-worthy, get it?
Or squawk-worthy?
It would have it would have been putting Teddy Hart in there. I think if that was Teddy Hart's avenue back, it would have given it some attention. It would have given it a different kind of edge. It would have
definitely would have given it. Definitely would have given it an edge, which it really did not have any real during the actual run of the Vulture Squad.
Yeah. But I just love that thing in the notes where it said Teddy Hart made several overtures, the several doing a lot of work in my imagination there, just calling up again and again. Sure, can't. Come on, you don't have to tell Gabe. You could just distract him one match a show. But that brings us to the show we are talking about today, and that would be Survival of the Fittest 2007. Took place October 19th, 2007 at the Empire Ballroom in Las Vegas, Nevada, in front of a reported crowd of 300 fans. Now, that's what the Observer said. That would, I think, tie us for the lowest recorded attendance, I think, that the Observer's report for an ROH show up to this point in history. I've seen other live reports, including Brian Alvarez at Figure 4 Weekly, that said lower than that. I think Brian Alvarez said 250, which would have made it maybe just flat out the least attended ROH show up to this point in company history.
I mean, 300 seemed like a big stretch for what we saw on the video. Now, granted, it was dark in there and there was a balcony and stuff, but like, it seemed like there were like 2 rows of fans, didn't it? Like from the video.
Yeah, and we'll talk. We got a little bit of news here that'll help elucidate why they're in because this wasn't Ring of Honor's first ever trip to the West Coast. So Dave Meltzer wrote in the Observer at the time, ROH will also be doing a full show with all the regulars being brought out as part of the wrestling/mixed martial arts convention at the Cow Palace in San Francisco on October 21st. They're looking for another West Coast date, perhaps Los Angeles or Las Vegas for that weekend. So yeah, if people don't know the story, which we will get into on the next show, ROH only came out to Las Vegas, which would be a big added expense because of all the flyouts. In fact, I was just listening today to a little clip of Chris Hero, a shoot interview he did years ago, and he said this was like years later that in all his first years in ROH, the only time he ever got flown out to a show rather than drove to a show by Ring of Honor was for this Vegas weekend.
Wow.
And so I imagine they had to do that with a lot of guys, like just you
Well,
can't tell
yeah,
anyone to
yeah,
drive.
yeah. You can't drive from like the East Coast to Las Vegas in a way that will also allow you to do like other bookings anytime during that week or in the near future. It'd be just too exhausting and too time consuming. And I say that, and I'm sure wrestlers have done it, but like realistically, it's not a super viable thing to do if you're busy.
And as we go through the card, you'll notice, that it's Ring of Honor doing what they kind of do when they go to the UK or things like that, where, they're not bringing every manager, every lower card guy. It's a more of a condensed roster that they're supplanting with local talent. They're trying to make the budget work the best way they can. But the whole reason they went to Vegas or the West Coast at all was for the show we're covering next time, which was the second half of this double shot, which was that wrestling convention, which that is one of the biggest shit shows in the last 30 years of pro wrestling. I think of the ground that covers.
Yeah, I know.
There's a million stories from.
It's been a long time since I thought about that, and I'm looking forward to, in hindsight, reliving the disaster that it was. Wasn't quite the Fire Festival because no one was stranded on an island,
Yeah.
but it's probably as close as you could come in pro wrestling, right?
Yeah, and so the whole idea was Ring of Honor was like, well, the big convention audience that they're going to get is going to carry us through, and it's going to justify doing this.
Well, wasn't it also like a sold show, so they were getting guaranteed
I think the
money?
second show at least was a sold show.
Yeah.
And I think I'm saving this for the next show, but I vaguely recall there's something where Gabe told one of the newsletters that they needed to draw $750 each night of the two nights to make like a trip to the West feasible financially. Well, I'll just spoil it. They're not going to do $750 combined for the two nights they do on this double shot. So yeah, this whole Vegas thing was basically like, well, we're really coming out just for the convention show. So we might as well, if we're bringing flying guys out, let's try and find a slot. I do think it probably, I have to imagine they probably would have done a better draw in Los Angeles.
Yeah, and if it was like a really big show they built up to, like for a long time, you could see maybe let them, because Ring of Honor is nationally known. I can't imagine that you didn't get a bunch of people that would want to go see a big Ring of Honor show with a big match. But these were both shows that were not super well hyped. Survival of the Fittest, we'll talk about it. It did have all of the main stars just about. There were a couple people that weren't there, but it's not like this was a skeleton crew by any means. But it had a Bryan Danielson versus Nigel McGuinness match, announced in advance, which is about as good as you're going to get with the regular roster. But none of the matches were particularly built up. There was no world title match. There wasn't even technically a tag team title match. So it wasn't their worst foot forward, but it definitely wasn't their best foot forward.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And so another thing to know about this is in the grand tradition of ROH, this was yet another show where the venue they end up running in was not the first venue they booked for this show. We'll go to the Observer, Meltzer wrote, the October 19th show in Las Vegas will not be at Sam's Town Casino, and they're working on a new location. And then Mike Johnson would add in PW Insider, Ring of Honor's October 19th Las Vegas house show will now be held at the Empire Ballroom after the previous venue backed down on holding the show after contracts were signed. As you could imagine, the company was just thrilled with that. So yeah, this was like a backup plan, which maybe is you would wonder, why would Ring of Honor book like a ballroom on the Las Vegas Strip that looks very cramped? Well, apparently this was a fallback position. I looked up online, Matt. The Empire Ballroom went out of business months after this. They were like hundreds of thousands of dollars behind on their rent. And I believe that the building that it occupied is now a Walgreens drugstore.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Sam's Town had just been immortalized by the Killers as the name of their second album. So
and that would be a regular stop for ROH in future years, right? I think they ran quite a few shows in Sam's Town.
Yeah, so who knows what's going on? I guess the fact that they backed out of their contract isn't enough for them to for the ROH to have forswear it forever. Although, I guess that was different ownership too.
And so for people that don't see the building, it is very cramped looking, very small. It's one of those buildings that's small enough where I think there's only two dives on the show, and they're both in the main event, and they have to basically dive into the front row because there's almost no space between the ring and the barricade.
And
There's
you could
bars.
seemingly hear everything every individual fan said.
Yeah.
It was
I
so
mean,
small.
I believe there was like a second level, but it is very inside. Like eventually, you see a lot of the crowd because the thing where places where matches go and things like that. Like there's a brawl outside the ring, but a lot of it at first I was like, wow, certain camera angles are very darkly lit, but at the same time, you can also tell how small this place is.
It honestly
And
looked
then
it honestly looked like more darkly lit FIP show. Like that's how it felt to me.
Yeah, so this was in some ways, I would imagine, the smallest show we will ever cover and this is my last one before we get to the show, which it's even smaller in a way when you get to this. So Dave wrote in the Observer, in Las Vegas, I know of people who got free tickets in the mail for the show because they were on a list of either people who had purchased tickets in the area or pay-per-views in the area, not sure which. But what hurt Las Vegas is you had to be 21 to attend this show. So yeah, that's one, because the show had a bar. I guess it had to be 21 and over, but that's even crazier when we talk about the show maybe did 250 to 300, if, whatever, and that how many of those got in for free? I mean, this was basically almost a free show at that point. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I mentioned their gate for this show was little to nothing. So, we begin with video of the Las Vegas Strip because the Empire Ballroom was on the main Las Vegas Strip where all the big casinos are. The camera zooms in on casinos like New York, and the Monte Carlo, which is another thing that doesn't even exist anymore. I think that's like Park MGM now or something. And can you tell I have a lot of old relatives because even though I'm Canadian, I know stupid things about casinos. Anyway.
Yeah, you really do seem to know more about Las Vegas than I do, that's for sure.
I've never been there, but like
I was there once. I was there once the weekend of Double or Nothing 2022. That is the weekend I was in Las Vegas.
If you have enough gambling addict elderly relatives, you learn Vegas through osmosis. Without against your will, you learn about Las Vegas. But so anyway, the camera, is showing you the casinos on the Strip, and then it pans over to the No Remorse Corps of Roderick Strong, Davey Richards, and Rocky Romero, and they're standing on the street. Roddy says that tonight's the night. Then at that point, he asks, Davey Richards is moping around. He asks him like, "Hey, what's wrong?" And Davey goes, "You guys charged drinks to my room last night?" And Rocky, at first Roddy denies it, but then Rocky, admits it. He says, "We'll pay you back after one of us wins Survival of the Fittest tonight." Then the guys, they gloat over chasing Matt Cross and Eric Stevens out of ROH on a recent show. They say, "We're going to win the Survival of the Fittest." Davey says that then he'll get to go out on the town with Roddy and Rocky tonight. And then they again tell him, no, you're not going to be able to go out with us tonight. You have to stay behind and watch our bags because Lord knows there's nowhere in Vegas that will watch your bags for you. Roddy says it doesn't matter which of them win the tournament tonight. Rocky then sings Viva Las Vegas very loud on the street. The camera then turns to zoom in on the Empire Ballroom sign. But what tickled me about this, Matt, was just below it on the same marquee was a sign for Fat Burger that was just about as large as the Empire Ballroom. So it was almost like they were emphasizing Fat Burger. Like these guys are getting some dinner. And it is. I mean, we've talked about this before, but it is crazy how Davey Richards went from a guy that was rumored that at one point Gabe was considering making him world champion on night one in the company to one of the biggest comic relief sources and like dork characters the promotion had at this point. It's like he's like they basically treat him at this point as if Bobby Dempsey was a better wrestler.
Do you think this is what Gabe had in mind? Do you think or do you think that when they do these promos that the wrestlers just sort of just did their own thing and Gabe was like, I don't think I want Davey Richards presented this way, but I guess so it's okay if this is your strength. How much control was he asserting over the presentation of this group?
I have to think that Davey had a lot of input on this because I think he's just a natural goofball. And if you watch the way he wrestles a lot of his matches, even in serious matches, he'll find one or two really goofy moments within them. Yeah. I think he just kind of has like a natural comic sensibility to kind of play the fool. But yeah, if I was a booker, I'd be like going in and going, that's that's not good for where we're probably eventually, if everything goes well for you, where we want you to go. Even though I think he's really good at playing that character,
I mean,
it is,
it's like a lower key version of the Kurt Angle situation, right? Like obviously
yeah,
Kurt was way more charismatic than Davey Richards, I would say. But you know, he was so good at being funny and silly and wacky that it was eventually to his detriment in a lot of ways.
yeah, right on. And
I actually want to mention though, it's funny. This is not the only promo where they just get um, well, actually, no, we'll get to that in the second part of
yeah, it's
the.
coming up in
Yeah, yeah,
just a
yes, yes.
second.
So hold on. Yes.
So yeah, the one thing that comes between it is we now get a highlight video recapping the previous 3 years of Survival of the Fittest tournaments and their winners, which I appreciated. And they're asking, who will join Bryan Danielson, Roderick Strong, and Delirious tonight as the fourth ever Survival of the Fittest champion. And we then cut back to the No Remorse Corps on the street as Ronnie and Rocky get Davey to hit on a girl that's also on the street. And I don't think this girl, for a second I was wondering, but the way she reacted, the way they shot this, I think this was unscripted.
And I was gonna say, I think also the Chris Hero promo later also involves like just random people on the street that were not part of it. And I was gonna say, well, it just goes to show Las Vegas is the place where people are going to just like you're going to be able to get random people to play along with you, and it just shows that what happens in Vegas ends up on an ROH DVD that almost no one ever saw. So what happens in Vegas truly does stay in Vegas, because if you were shown on this DVD, you're in good shape to stay hidden forever.
So the girl high fives Davey when he tries to hit on her, and she asks, "Are you drinking?" Because she's carrying one of those like big novelty drinks that Vegas is lousy with. Davey says no, and he goes, "Well, and since I can't drink, I was wondering, could you hang out with me and watch the bags later?" And she says she can't do that. And the girls laugh at Rocky as he does the Asuka dance, and then he asks if he can have a kiss, and one girl actually does give him a peck on the cheek, and then Davey turns to Rocky and goes, "Oh, when will you teach me how to do that?" So again, continuing the, Rocky is the cool guy, Davey is the awkward, fumbling guy, and I felt like this made everyone involved look geeky, like all the wrestlers. Like we'll get to that segment you talk about that's at the end of the show, but I mean, look, they were funny skits, but they also kind of made Ring of Honor look low rent.
Yeah, I mean this show felt extremely low rent in almost every way. Except I guess in some ways, in certain situations, the quality of the wrestling, I guess. But I mean again, we've said this many times, but for all the praise ROH gets for like presenting their product in a serious, disciplined way, a lot of times they didn't.
Yeah, because so often, right, how many times have we watched these shows, and it's happened more than a couple times where they start the show trying to show you like the long line to get into the building, or, here's a newscaster that briefly mentioned Ring of Honor wrestling. I think that we'll get another one of those in a couple shows from now. And, they always want to project, that we're a fairly big deal, even though we're an indie wrestling federation. And there are multiple skits on the show where the main takeaway is no one on the street, like a block away from the show is being held tonight, has any idea who the hell any of these people are. And they just see them as giant jokes.
Yes.
So it was kind of like, it's going for a company that was like less image conscious. I wouldn't have cared as much, but I was like, oh, you definitely are sensitive about this usually, and on this show you're kind of just letting it hang out there. But we cut to Bobby Cruz in the ring. He's in a very darkly lit building, and he tells the crowd there's a tradition in ROH that whenever a new world champion is crowned, they open the next show with an interview with that wrestler in the ring. He introduces Nigel McGuinness, who, of course, is the new ROH world champion, who won in the main event of the last show, or the main event, the pay-per-view portion. Nigel says it's great to be ROH champion, and it's always been a dream of his. When fans shout things like, you've earned it and you're the man, he agrees with them. He's like, you're right. I do deserve this.
And again, because of the size of the audience, he and we can hear every single thing an audience member shouts out crystal clearly. Probably better than what's on the house mic, honestly.
And I will say this wasn't like the best crowd ever, but it was one of those crowds where not many people showed up, but the people that did were pretty decent, I think, in terms of the reactions. Like
Yeah, yeah.
the people that did show up were were ROH fans. It wasn't like, well, we only got 250 people to show up and they were all strangers to the product. It sounded like, oh, the people that did come here were pretty excited to finally see Ring of Honor. I feel a little bad. This is what they got, but they're chanting for Nigel right away when they see him, so they're excited. Nigel says this is just the start of a long road, and he knows that he's going to be a great ROH champion. At this point, the FIP World Champion, Roderick Strong, comes out. Roddy calls Nigel a fluke and a paper champion. He calls the FIP World title the most prestigious belt in wrestling today. He's defended it for over 11 months. He's defeated Christopher Daniels, Austin Aries, Delirious, Shingo, and even the man he's facing tonight, Brent Albright. A fan tells Roddy, go back to Florida. And proving again your point, you can hear every heckle distinctly. Brent Albright and Shane Hagedorn then come out. Albright tells Nigel he better shine that belt up real nice because he's beaten Nigel before and he's going to take that title one day. He then tells Roddy he wants to do their match right now. Nigel says he has an important match with Bryan Danielson tonight, so why don't you girls fight it out now and he'll see the winner in the final. So see, they're girls. They're not as good as men, Matt. But yeah, this was not the in the grand history of new ROH World Champion show opening promos, this was the least substantial.
Yeah, I'd say I feel it feels a little depressing in front of that small crowd in that dark place, and it was just like I feel like Nigel was not thrilled that this was his big crowning moment on the show after he wins the title, but I guess he was being a good sport about it.
Well, he had another reason to be grumpy because we have this is the best place to talk about this. This is probably one of the major stories going into the show, which was, we'll go to the Observer one more time. Dave Meltzer wrote, Nigel McGuinness suffered what appears to be a torn left biceps while in England last week, which was the week before the show, I believe. He worked the weekend shows, what Dave's referring to the shows tonight and the next one we're covering, but is going to have the arm looked at this week. His mentality is he's worked hard for a long time to get the title and doesn't want to have to drop it right away if it can be avoided. He canceled his PWG European tour this week and is having an MRI done on October 26th and will have the results early next week. He has health insurance through ROH, so if he needs surgery, he can afford it. Mentally, he's going to want to work through it as champion like Bryan Danielson did with his shoulder in 2006, but was fearing the worst. The PW Torch would write, McGuinness is said to not be in much pain due to his injury and is hopeful of being at full strength soon. Gabe Sapolsky wrote on the ROH website, quote, I just got off the phone with Nigel McGuinness, and there is good and bad news. The bad news is that Nigel has a torn left bicep. The good news is the doctors think with some rest that he will not need surgery and that it will heal by Final Battle weekend at the end of December. Since Nigel has already made his first defense, we will keep the belt on Nigel until Final Battle weekend. If Nigel is unable to compete by the end of December, then we might have to make a move with the belt. Nigel wants to send his apologies for not being able to compete this weekend. I have to admit that it was a hard conversation with him. Let me assure you there's nothing in the world that Nigel wants more than to be able to give you great world title matches this weekend. He has worked his entire life just to get to the spot, and this is just terrible luck. However, it is for the best that Nigel uses this time to heal so he can be 100% when his world title reign resumes. Nigel will be available for autographs before both the Philly and New York events this weekend, which would be the two events after this double shot. We apologize for the lineup change. We will have something posted soon with revised lineups for this weekend and huge news about Final Battle weekend. Thank you for understanding during these difficult circumstances. We assure you that we will deliver two epic events this weekend. Thank you. So here's the crazy thing. Nigel works there after this double shot, which he works both shows, full length matches. The next double shot, the one that Gabe is saying Nigel can't, be on, we got to keep him off the Final Battle weekend so he's 100%. He works a match on one of those shows and takes the next night off. Then the next double shot, he works one night on one of those shows, takes the next night off, and then if he does come back Final Battle weekend, works the first night, suffers an incredibly serious, horrifying concussion, has to take the next night off. So
No, I mean, we're going to have a lot of time to talk about this, but Nigel's title reign, to me, is one of the most fascinating stories in ROH history. Like, the way it starts, you would never guess the way it would develop based on that, and that he would become the second longest reigning champion in ROH history and have, pretty pretty epic title reign in some ways, and it was a crazy time, and just the ups and downs of that, just unbelievable. And a lot of it was sad, but I am looking forward to covering it because wow, what a crazy what a crazy ride for Nigel McGuinness and for ROH fans, honestly.
And remember, Nigel had already suffered a lot of injuries in ROH before this. I've referenced before the show. I know David Bixenspan, former guest of the show, has told an anecdote where once, years and years after this, he interviewed Nigel and asked him like about ROH memories, and he was like, "I don't remember any of that because of the head trauma."
Yeah.
And on top of that, we talked, this is the same year, just months later, of those London shows where he like got hurt pretty goddamn bad, working Joe in night one of the the England double shot. And then, the next night against Jimmy Ray, you was really gutting through it in an obvious way. And then on the last note I have here is, Mike Johnson around this time interviewed Samoa Joe. And one of the questions Mike Johnson asked was about Nigel McGuinness, like he just won the ROH world title. And I think this is before Nigel tore his bicep. And Joe said this, quote, how he felt about it. He said, "Fantastic. There's no more deserving guy. Nigel's a warrior. We discussed my injuries, but Nigel's been pretty much held together with duct tape these last few months. To see him get the strap is really great. I think he's the right guy at the right time." So before the injuries we're going to see that he just suffered, that he's going into this match, and the crazy concussion he's going to get like 5 shows down the line, he's already like in such a state where Joe is like, "Yeah, boy, this Nigel guy, you should only know how fucking in it he is right now." Like, it is insane, and quite frankly, kind of uncomfortable to look back on that he never really took time off. Like, yes,
it was uncomfortable at the time, Trevor. Like, it was a whole big thing. They worked it into a storyline and everything,
Yeah, but I think it's even more uncomfortable looking back, knowing, like, at this time, be like, "Oh, okay, he tore his bicep," but knowing that just the injuries he had suffered before and that more are coming, it's just a nutty thing. But we'll go to the opener.
In some ways, it's worse in hindsight. In some ways, it's like, okay, at least he landed okay in life. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But yes, I totally know what you're saying.
And I realize this particular injury, a bicep tear, is considered, depending on the severity, one of those injuries you can work through. And Nigel, this is something he doesn't get surgery for, and it is something he just, you train the muscles around it, and you usually can't, again, depending on the severity of the tear, can kind of work through and avoid surgery if you really want to sometimes. But it still feels crazy where this was also, I think we just read on a recent show, there was that thing where Gabe was like, after, in the wake of the Benoit stuff, they were like, we're not pressing guys to work injured, blah, blah, blah. We're taking health way more seriously now. And as we'll get to on this show, Nigel's not the only guy on the show who's clearly not in like great condition to perform, that they're just having gut through a match, which we'll get through much later in the show. But first match of the night, Survival of the Fittest, 2007 first round match. Roderick Strong defeated Brent Albright via pinfall in 9 minutes even, after a gut buster and a roll up with his hand grabbing Brent's tights. So yeah, this whole night is built around the Survival of the Fittest tournament. This is the 4th one they've done, 4th straight year. For those who are just joining us for some reason, this is the first one you've gone to. This is a 2-round tournament. It is usually, occasionally they'll throw a tag match in there, but it's usually 6 singles matches. The winners of those matches go on to the final. That's usually the same night. I think they've changed it in modern years sometimes, but and the second round is the final, and it's just a 6-man elimination match where, the final person standing wins. And in 2006, Gabe actually wanted to do away with or at least put it to rest for a while. And I'll talk about that more later, I think. But anyway, Matt, what do you think? This tournament, almost in a different world, even this one didn't happen. Some might argue it shouldn't have. But Matt, what do you think about this as the opener?
It's hard to find much to say about it. It was like solidly worked, I guess, but very dull. I mean, it was heel versus heel. I guess what I would say that, like, what I liked about it was some of the stuff that people probably wouldn't like about it, which was like the boring grappling they were doing at the very beginning. Like, it's kind of like classic ROH opener stuff. And, Strong hitting a really nice drop kick right to the face, like just like really basic stuff that I was like, okay, I guess that was nicely worked. But in reality, it was just pretty dull. Like I don't know, they hit some of their big moves. It was not very long. There was a spot where, or at the end, where Strong uh, he avoids the half Nelson suplex, hits the double knees, and goes right into a roll up holding the tights. And I think it's very funny in 2007 to hear Leonard all indignantly yell, "He's got the tights!" because it just seems so quaint. But that was how they ended this match. It was just like a lot of matches on this show, just like basic, not a lot of memorable spots. I did enjoy when they started talking about how Human Tornado would be debuting on the show. Lenny Leonard promotes him by saying he's all over MySpace, and I realized I should have counted the MySpace references they did in ROH between 2005 and 2008 because I think it would be a surprisingly large number. But
I literally wrote that in the notes that we should have started a MySpace counter, so we had the exact same thought.
yeah, that's very funny actually. But it just goes to show that it's true. Like they have mentioned it a lot. But yeah, there's so little to say about this match, honestly.
Yeah, this show, maybe Matt alluded to us, maybe me trying to fill time to stretch the show, and that's because I always feel guilty. Although maybe we should take pride in a nice breezy listen, but this show is a podcaster's nightmare because there's a lot of matches like this which are technically fine, competent, dull, and there's not much to say about them. This match had a lot of reasons for the guys involved to mail it in. It's a B show. It's a first round match in a multi-round tournament. It's happening a show that did a low, possibly record low attendance, and they mailed it in. Though they're, like a lot of tournament matches we'll see tonight, it's somewhat on the short side. But despite that, Albright still spends the first half of this match doing almost nothing, mostly some plodding arm work that leads nowhere. I don't think I liked the mat work in this one quite as much as you did, and I know you didn't love this match either. Like a lot of matches in wrestling tournaments, the person losing gets the lion's share of the offense, so they get to show the case themselves in their one appearance of the night. But Albright gets more offense, but he doesn't really showcase himself. They hit these two guys, they hit a few signature moves, but I felt like they left a lot on the table. Even the finish I felt was oddly flat, where Roddy wins with a move he never wins with, the gut buster. And even the grabbing of the tights, it didn't look like a very tight grabbing of the tights. Like it was like, even the grabbing the tights was, no pun intended, half-assed. That's just the way it felt here. And
although you know what, I think that's probably true of a lot of like famous like grabbing the tights finishes, like where they're not really like working it stiff.
Yeah, I guess you want to err on the side of caution with those. You don't want to give anyone in the crowd like a formative memory of, the first time I saw a nude male was at the ROH Survival of the Fittest 2007 show. Because all the young girls that attend ROH.
It was 21 plus, Trevor. So we're all good.
Yeah, exactly. So otherwise, the attempts probably would have been doubled with a lot of Nancy Drews. And in a way, though, this was the best slot on the card for this match because as the opener, the fans were actually fairly into this. They were excited to find. You could tell, I think, from listening to them, they were excited, like, okay, we're finally getting to see some authentic Ring of Honor wrestling. I almost feel like they didn't in this match get to see authentic Ring of Honor wrestling.
Yeah.
But I was bored by this. I almost want to give it a below average, but it is so blandly competent. I guess it deserves a super low average. But Albright is so frustrating to me because he has the tools to actually have very good matches, and he flashes them just often enough to make you angry that he's not regularly having fun matches. Like when you watch, I realized like the Morishima match was a special occasion with a really talented opponent that could do special things. But even in that match, there's things you see from Albright in an effort, in a way of working there, where it's like, why can't you just be more of that all the time? And it seems more often he's content to have matches where he slows things down, he kind of meanders on the mat, he pulls out a few spots on the end. Like he seems like one of the few guys in ROH where he's content to give 60% fairly often, not just in Las Vegas. We then cut to the busy streets of Vegas. which ROH is really getting a lot of mileage out of the show. They really like doing these Vegas Strip promos. Delirious cuts a promo in Delirious Ease as people walk by. That includes him saying things in English that we can understand, like roll of the dice, Las Vegas Strip, and repeat, 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 because, he's won this tournament before.
Just last year.
Yeah. And that brings us to the second match in the Survival of the Fittest tournament. Chris Hero defeated Carl Anderson via submission in 7 minutes, 1 second when he made him tap out to the Hangman's Clutch.
And by the way, if you don't know, like after watching Carl Anderson in New Japan or WWE, if you don't know why he became an Anderson, well, watching this match will make it very clear. Just by looking at him, I mean.
Yeah, and like if you've never seen early Carl Anderson, he still has hair at this point, but he's losing a war, and he's got like the horseshoe going. He's at that stage where it's like the last. I'd be interested to know, because I wasn't really tracking, but I know he starts in New Japan the next year. I'd be interested to know when he decided to just shave it, because his hair in this show seems like it's like at the last stage where you decide, fuck it, I'm just going to shave my head from now on.
But I wonder if he decided, this makes me look more like Arn Anderson by keeping my hair like this. So he even has it's funny how like every stockily built wrestler who is balding becomes an Anderson. Like he definitely was more stocky here and less muscular. Yeah. So I mean, it definitely fit, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Although no one has the Arn, like I don't think not just in wrestling, in my life, I've never seen another person that had the Arn Anderson baldness pattern of you've kept your hairline and nothing else. Like literally like a half centimeter of hair where your hairline is and everything behind that has gone. I don't think I've seen another person in my entire life that balded that way.
I'm gonna try to find someone just for you.
Yeah, I'm sure there is someone, but there's no one I've ever seen. So yeah, this is Carl Anderson's first match ever in ROH. He had been wrestling for a few years by this point, but this was the year I would say he started to get on more fans' radar, since it was the one where he became a regular in PWG. So he's the first of multiple people we'll see on the show that got a booking because they're on the West Coast and they wouldn't have to fly him in. The next year, he'd start his long tenure in New Japan, and that's what really put him on the map, I think, to more people, really started to break him through. But at only 7 minutes, I would say this was the mini version of a 2007 Chris Hero match with only a minute or two of him flipping. He actually gave Anderson a decent amount of offense here by the end, but this match falls into the giant pantheon of short ROH debut matches where the wrestler that is debuting doesn't get enough time to show anything but the fact that they're like fundamentally sound. Like you see just enough from them to know, okay, they seem like a decent trained pro wrestler that you could trust in a match. But in terms of like what makes him special, what makes him unique, I don't think you get anything from this. It's fine, it's average, but it's slight and forgettable. And I guess the thing I want to end on this match on is I would say I always felt like one of the advantages of the Survival of the Fittest structure being only 2 rounds and the final round being an elimination match is it's a tournament where, in theory, a lot of the wrestlers could work a lot closer to All Out in their first match, because it's like, well, you're only wrestling one more time tonight, and that match is going to be an elimination match where you're going to get chances to take a break, and you might not even be in that match that long. And yet on this night, you get like they don't book that way at all. They book the opposite, like almost everything other than 2 matches in this entire first round of this tournament are pretty damn short.
At least in this era, on any of the previous Survival of the Fittest shows, there are very, very few memorable Survival of the Fittest first round matches. Like I could think of, obviously Bryan Danielson versus Jack Evans, and then I'm drawing a blank.
And I think this DVD was maybe 2 hours and 37 minutes long, which is on the very short end for ROH DVDs. So ROH DVDs, they often go like 3 and a quarter. They easily could have given a few of these matches a few minutes more each. But on this night, like this show did kind of have the vibe of just them showing up, seeing the crowd draw, and going, let's just get this over with. Like, let's just get to San Francisco.
Yeah.
So what'd you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, just another match that just, Hero, like I said, did much less of his shtick. Anderson was totally all business, didn't play to the crowd at all. I mean, it was just like, in certain contexts, I'd have been pretty excited for Chris Hero versus Carl Anderson, But this was just, solid work, but just too basic to be exciting. Like you said, Anderson definitely didn't come across as anything other than just a pretty bare bones basic wrestler, to the point where it's like, okay, what's the point of this? Hero had his shtick toned down. Yeah, just another match where there's just nothing to say about it other than Carl Anderson looked different than he would later on.
I think someone played the wrong entrance theme for Hero. And going back to your thing about how you can hear what everyone says, it might have been the sound guy. You can literally hear someone when they played the wrong theme for Hero before they correct it. You can hear someone say very clearly, "My bad." So, just like you can hear every goddamn thing in this building on this night. And we then immediately cut to Hero and Sweeney celebrating backstage. So, Matt, they have, Gabe is still, not all the time, but he is still trying to keep his latest interview idea alive of doing the immediate post-match promos just for select guys.
Yeah, but, good for him for sticking with something for a few shows.
Yeah. The most withering praise. But so yeah, they're Sweeney and Hero are backstage. They're celebrating. Hero puts on a headband and asks if this looks like the fittest man in Ring of Honor. Sweeney says the odds of Hero winning the tournament tonight are so good you can't bet against him in Vegas. They don't allow it. Hero says he's the greatest entertainer in Las Vegas. Sweeney laughs as Hero calls for a high five. And the best part of this promo was Sweeney looks like he legit doesn't notice at first that Hero's like motioning for a high five. And you can see Hero in a way that almost feels a little bit legit. Just say, he mutters like, "Up top, don't leave me hanging."
Yeah.
And then Sweeney turns around and high fives. I thought that almost felt real, and I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I think it was kind of real. Yeah, and one of the better moments of the DVD, honestly.
Yeah, that should tell you a lot. But next match, another Survival of the Fittest first round match. Rocky Romero defeated TJ Perkins via pinfall in 6 minutes, 29 seconds after a roundhouse kick to the side of the head. This is Perkins' second of 3 matches he'll work in ROH this year. He wrestled, if you've longtime listeners will remember that he's wrestled from time to time in the early years of ROH wearing a mask under the name Puma, but in 2007 was the first year in the company has seen him as himself. And yeah, another guy who, because he was a West Coast based wrestler, and so we get to see him again. And I think TJP is one of those guys where if he had been Northeast based, he would have been a regular. At least Gabe would at least given him like a stint. But as it is, we only get him, in these little occasions here. But Matt, what'd you think?
Perkins really looks like an emo heartthrob in this era with like the hair the way it is. And I also thought he kind of, in addition to emo people, kind of in the face resembled a young Julian Casablancas with the hair the way it was. Like that, it stuck out to me that way. But like, yeah, so he definitely had a good look. And he definitely does more flashy stuff than anyone so far, with like a fun slide into a running, leaping headbutt in the corner to Romero's back. And there are a few nice spots there, like, and Romero's octopus hold gets one of the better reactions of the first 3 matches. And, there's a spot where Perkins leaps through Romero's leg into a neck breaker. So they do a little bit more flash here than in the previous 2 matches, but still it was too short to amount to much. You'd think they could have a better match with a little more time, because they know each other really well, obviously, these 2 guys. And I like that they're incorporating new people, but they just are never able to be presented as a threat to the established stars. But like you said, I guess just because they're not able to be booked them enough. But yeah, I'd say this match was more entertaining than the previous 2 matches, but still short, not that exciting, and not that dramatic, and ultimately pretty forgettable.
Yeah, I was excited for this match. These 2 have familiarity, like you said, Matt. For those who don't know, they trained together in the New Japan's relatively short-lived U.S. dojo. So because I was excited for this match,
also wasn't Perkins also a member of the Havana Pitbulls in other promotions?
Oh yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, God, I always think of the Havana Pitbulls as just Reyes and Romero, because that's how they were in ROH. But yeah, you're right, I think. So yeah, this is the shortest match we've seen yet. And it's a clear, I thought this was a clear, it wasn't still like anything to, go, oh my God, you have to see this. But I thought this was a clear step up over the last 2 matches. These guys just worked at a whole different level of pace. And even I felt like their energy that they do their mat work with was noticeably higher. And so this was the first match of the night where, instead of thinking like, well, on a different card with more time, maybe they would have had a better better match. Where this was a match where I watched and I felt like I just wish they had double the time to keep doing what they were doing. It's like I kind of felt like they were getting into a bit of a groove. The end is fun where it breaks down to this big strike exchange that Rocky wins with his knockout kick. But overall, yeah, like you said, this was short. I felt like it had way more dynamism. I don't know how than the other two matches. You got some grappling. You got some typical wrestling high spots. You got two guys trying to knock each other out. I can only go so high on this because of the length, and it wasn't some hidden gem where I go, you need to see it. But at this point in the card, it was a relief to see something like that was at least not just that was a little more than, oh, that's okay, I guess. And this was closer to what, if you have to do short tournament matches, this is closer to what I would want them to be. So I would give this an above average. But again, the most notable thing might have been TJP made his full ring entrance holding a bottle of water between his teeth, including when he leaps over through the ropes into the ring and poses. Like he, for some reason, decided, I'm going to do my entire entrance with a bottle of water in my mouth.
He was like,
two good hands.
He was like, Triple H, you think you can make a bottle of water memorable? Watch what I can do.
And that brings us to the Survival of the Fittest first round match. Again, Austin Aries defeated Delirious via submission in 12 minutes, 17 seconds when he made him tap out to the last chancery. And this is a battle of a guy in Aries who had never won the tournament, but had gotten down to the final 2-man in it twice in the previous 3 years. And like you said earlier, Matt, the Delirious is the guy who won it the year before. So it's also a battle of two different head trainers of the ROH Wrestling School. It took me a while in the middle of the match, I realized, oh yeah, these guys were both at different points trainers of the school. And so this ends up being the second longest match of the first round, although it's still only 12 minutes, but that's still a decent length of time, but nothing crazy. Aries is one of the most consistent wrestlers in ROH in this era, in my opinion, and this is a very professional wrestling match. It is bog standard, straight down the middle stuff from these two, but on this show, I would say it's the first and only thing in the first hour of this DVD that feels like a full-fat wrestling match where it just is like, oh, you're getting the whole thing. There are no surprises, I would say, until the final 2 minutes. And because it's a face versus face match, there's not a great story hook or you're missing a little bit of that added snap of intensity. But the crowd is still hungry enough for this, and they're hungry enough for ROH in general, I guess would be the better way to put it, that there's a moment in this match where, like 10 minutes in, that I think this match gets one of the more undeserved "this is awesome" chants we've heard on through the years.
I wrote the same thing. One of the most surprising ones, another word I might use for it would be perplexing. But yes, I agree.
Like, it was getting to the point of being like, oh, this is the best match we've seen so far in the first hour of the show. But that was still, like, I think I wrote in my notes, if this is awesome, then like 70% of Ring of Honor matches on most B shows are awesome then. So, but I don't want to ding this match. The match up to that point had been very solid, but I feel like this poor crowd, this Vegas crowd, those fans, they were starved for Ring of Honor, and they'd been given crumbs up to this point, and they finally got like a breakfast cereal bar, not even a good one, like the Wild Berry, but they were enjoying it. So the final 2 minutes of the match, I do have the more interesting parts of the match though. Once they do this is awesome chant, they're like, well, we're gonna reward you now. Like Delirious hits Matt Seidel's "Here It Is" driver and even shouts "Here it is." So he's doing a little, tribute to his recently departed friend. Delirious then hits his usual running knee, the panic attack knee in the corner. But usually when he does it, his opponent is sitting with his back flat against the turnbuckles. And, Delirious just kind of just hits it, close to his head, but not at his head. But this time when he starts running, Aries is sitting further away from the buckles. And he takes a gnarly looking, he flies into the buckles from the knee. And I was like, that probably isn't the way you should take it, but it looks real good. And then not long after that, Aries takes a great-looking bump for the Delirious's Cobra Clutch suplex. So a couple real nice bumps from Aries. Overall, this is I would say a high above average. To me, this is what should be the base level for a tournament match. But instead, at this point in the show, it's been the highlight. But I feel like this is kind of like, in a perfect world, what you expect as a bare minimum level match for like a really high quality in-ring wrestling promotions tournament. But What'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with what you said. It certainly was a very large upgrade in star power, like star versus star match, two people that have over characters with charisma wrestling each other. So you could guess, maybe just that alone is what made it awesome for the crowd in Vegas. Like, oh, this is like you said,
Yeah.
a full. I like how you were able to use the food analogies, a full fat wrestling match. I enjoyed. Yeah, another match where you get to hear random things people say, like at some point early in the match, when as Aries was driving his knee into Delirious's back, someone yells, "Happy Halloween, Delirious!" And I was wondering, like, why just Delirious? Why is he the only one that has to be that gets wished a happy Halloween? Like other wrestlers should enjoy Halloween too, don't you think? And also at one point, Dave Prazak, because of Delirious's continually growing beard or goatee, he does that Jim Neidhart style, "Yeah, baby," in response. I know that was a bad Jim Neidhart impression, but I was impersonating Prazak doing Jim Neidhart. So,
Yeah, for those who haven't heard the show, it is a great impression of the Dave Prazak impression. It isn't really, but I want to boost you up.
No, it's like, when you copy a tape and a copy of a copy of a copy, it just gets
Yeah.
degraded as it goes down the
Yeah.
impression
If I did an
list.
impression of your impression, it would be the worst thing. It would be like a brown note. You would hate it.
Yeah. I agree. I would hate it. Then there was a spot where Delirious hits a senton and he yells, "Ching ching, Delirious wins." And I guess that was because Las Vegas? Like, was that supposed to be the sound of a slot machine? I don't know. I'll ask Albert Ching when he's back on the show. But the yeah, I mean, there's really not much that I could say about this that you didn't say. I think down the stretch, there was a couple very fun minutes. I liked the Delirious busting out the Seidel move because one, it's a cool move, and two, it's a nice little tribute. And yeah, I mean, Aries is trying to start getting the last chancery over, so that was a good spot to finish with. And yeah, a perfectly fine match that seemed better in comparison to what it was placed next to.
You mentioned Prazak doing the Jim Neidhart impression. I felt like in general on this show, this was about as loose as we've ever heard Lenny and Prazak on ROH commentary. It felt like even they were taking the show a little bit less seriously. And it wasn't anywhere close to like how loose Prazak would be on, say, a IWA Mid-South show. But like at one point during this match, they just start talking like, "I wonder if Delirious can wear his mask in Las Vegas casinos," and they start saying Becky Bayless needs to start getting the scoops. Like they're just like riffing at one point and kind of just like it feels like they're just loose and kind of goofy here. But in general, they're still pretty straight-laced. But we then jump to Austin Aries backstage, who thanks Delirious for being there for him when he couldn't be, which is referring to Delirious teaming with the Resilience when TNA pulled Aries briefly from Ring of Honor. Aries says he's been practicing countering submissions as part of his training for a series of matches with Bryan Danielson, and unfortunately for Delirious, that counter practice included the Cobra stretch.
I really enjoyed that little detail that he was like, I'm becoming, this is my wrestling strategy now of learning how to escape submission holds. Like that's like kind of an old school, just like, oh, I'm preparing for this wrestler by doing something different that you don't get too much these days, or in the 2000s. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like I miss, trying to treat wrestling like it's a strategy and like you're referencing, yeah, I had to come up with something different or I've been training for this lately and so that gave me this extra kind of superpower against you. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff, like, does that sell extra tickets? Probably not, but it's just, yeah, I like that kind of detail work too. That's a great point. So Aries ends the promo by saying this year he will not be denied. He will be the survival of the fittest champion once and for all. And ROH, like, they had a lot of survival of the fittest, and he's never won it. So it's funny, like you would almost think the way they talk about and the way they set him up to basically make the finals every year and make the final two in the 2 of the first 3 years, or maybe 2 of the first 2 years. The first 2 years that like they were setting up some grand plan that if Aries, stays in the kind of 5-6 years, it was like the MJF ring thing where you're like, oh, when he finally doesn't win the ring, it's going to be a great payoff. And it's like, no, just not going to win it one year. That brings us to another Survival of the Fittest 2007 first round match. Claudio Castagnoli defeats Davey Richards via pinfall in 7 minutes 59 seconds with the Ricola Bomb. So Claudio's theme song briefly stops during his entrance. I just wrote my notes. This sound guy having a rough night. Matt, another shortest match, another match that probably on another show they would have gotten another 5 minutes. But what'd you think?
I think that this was one of the better matches of the first round. Like I enjoyed it. It certainly was not at the high end of what you would expect a Claudio Castagnoli versus Davey Richards match to be. But it definitely was not like one of the first couple matches where there was just not much happening at all. Claudio gets a giant swing very early, and it's a good one, which I enjoy. Prazak mentions during this that there will be a 2007 trilogy of tournaments because there's a trios tournament still to come in 2007, and I got bad news, but we'll get to that another day.
Your Wade Barrett impression isn't even as good as your Dave Prazak, and that was an awful Wade Barrett impression.
I agree, a very bad Wade Barrett impression. That's what I'm known for, is a bad Wade Barrett impression.
You got some bad news.
Yeah, I know. I got bad news about my Wade Barrett impression. Richards starts working over Claudio's legs, I say, with like an interesting hold that I can't describe, but if you ever go back and watch the show that we're not recommending, you could go look for this hold that I'm talking about. Just Claudio, they go for their moves, they reverse it. Richards reverses a Ricola Bomb into a Rana, and then he starts picking up the pace, like backflip off the top rope, backslide, dragon screw, leg whip, a stretch muffler, works the muffler for a little while. There's a cool counter where Richards counters the Alpamari water slide with an arm drag. And then there's another spot where Richards goes for the handspring kick, but Claudio uppercuts him from behind and hits the Alpamari water slide. So I like those two reversals. And I did notice there's a spot where Richards yells, DR driver. And every time he does that, he won't hit it. And I feel like, is that true for basically every wrestling move in existence? That if someone yells that they're going to do the move, it means they definitely are not going to hit the move? Would you say that's a 100% guarantee, at least post 2000?
If it's not 100%, it has to be like 90, 95. That's another thing I've never thought of till you just said that. But yeah, it is. It'd be almost weird. You know what? You probably are right about 100% because I almost feel like if I saw someone say the name of the move and then successfully hit it, I almost think I would remember it because it was so notable to me.
Well, I'm sure somebody somewhere will tell us about a situation where this has happened. Claudio, tries to fight back after Richards goes for the DR driver. Leonard starts wondering if Claudio has a concussion, and I was like, does that mean he does? Because they usually seem to know, but I think that he probably didn't because he worked the main event and seemed fine and stuff. But at this point, the way ROH commentary talks about injuries, it's like if they mention an injury, it must mean they actually know they had it or something. But and eventually Claudio fights back, gets kicked in the back of the head, but he hits a European uppercut into the Ricola Bomb and gets the win. Yeah, which I did think was a pretty anticlimactic finish. I would say this is, I don't know, first or second best match that we've reviewed up until this point on the show, which is low praise, but it was solid. Very unmemorable. Could have been better, but I would say a good match over for what it was.
Yeah, I would call this pretty fun while it lasted. Davey goes after Claudio's leg pretty hard early, and Claudio, I felt he did a good job of selling it the rest of the way. It was selling where it didn't stop him from doing anything involving his leg, but he was selling pain that it was hurting him throughout the rest of the match, which I'll take. And I liked late in the match when they were fighting standing on the turnbuckles, Davey gained control just by punching Claudio in the leg rather than on his back or his head, like you would normally see in that situation where you're staying on the turnbuckles. I just, again, just a very basic, simple attention to playing a story throughout a match of if I need to, win an advantage, I'm going after the body part I've worked over the whole match. And like Romero and Perkins, this is a match with high energy from the jump, a quick pace. We get the, like you said, the giant swing in the first minute of the match, I think, Claudio usually does not break it out that early. I felt like there were a couple notable spots with Claudio, European uppercutting Davey mid handspring, and then there was a super high back body drop from Claudio where it almost looked like Claudio was trying to do a pop-up European uppercut and they called an audible in midair. I don't think that's what happened, but he was popping up so high. I was like, oh, he's going to do the pop-up European uppercut, but no, like Davey just takes the back bump. And I like a good high back body drop. Wrestling needs to bring back the back body drop. I like that move, but the end, like you, I didn't love the end. It felt somewhat abrupt. At the time, I was like, did Claudio get legit hurt? Because what happens is they spend the whole match telling the story of Davey's attacking Claudio's leg and Claudio selling the leg. And then in like the last minute or whatever of the match, Claudio takes, I think, a sunset flip powerbomb or something. And he immediately starts grabbing his neck and stuff. And it's like they sell a second separate injury in the match for Claudio, but only in the final 30 seconds because he's slow to get up and he's grabbing at his head from there on out. And I think what happens is we'll see, like, I guess I'll talk about it later, but it's weird what they do with this. But as far as the match itself, I will say I think if these guys had just a few more minutes, we could have had our first like outright good to very good match of the show. But as it is, I would just say this is high above average. And again, going back to the point of Davey Richards is the geek of his group. He is the only member of his stable that doesn't win his tournament match. You know, he's the one guy that loses. So after the match, the ref checks on Claudio, who points to his neck in pain. He grabs it all the way to the back. We then cut to Claudio cutting a promo backstage where he's pressing a towel against his neck, still selling it. And he says he was this close to submitting to what he calls Davey's, quote, horse collar-like submission. Claudio says that even though he jammed something in his neck, he's going to win this tournament just like he won the Race to the Top tournament earlier in the year. So, yeah, that almost sounded like a Vince McMahon verbiage. Like, you can't say horse collar. It's a horse collar-like facility.
Well, but, what was the famous one? Like a box type
structure, and then there was something like the medical facility, or so you couldn't say hospital.
Box type structure definitely is still still takes the cake.
Yeah, that's
because they were using it to describe a box.
Could you imagine Vince McMahon Nirvana, the heart-shaped box-like structure? So that brings us to another Survival of the Fittest 2007 first-round match. Bryan Danielson and Nigel McGuinness went to a 20-minute time limit draw. Now, I believe in the first couple years of this tournament, the first-round matches did not have 20-minute time limit draws, but then Gabe discovered the joy of the, I can have a get-out-free booking card here if I make it a short time limit. And so we get this match. I felt like this match had its own very unique identity from the other Nigel Danielson matches, and we've seen a lot of them at this point. Like, I felt like watching this match, you could feel their history in the way they wrestled this, where they wrestled this match like they've wrestled each other a million times before. There's this confidence in how they work each other, and there's also this energy of it being a real dick measuring contest, because even though this is not a pure rules match, at some points they almost wrestle it like it is, because early on, both guys, especially Bryan, they pick spots where they're actively they're in a submission, they're near the ropes, and they actively resist grabbing the ropes to break the hold because they want to prove that they don't need it. I'm going to prove I'm better than you at technical wrestling. I don't even need a goddamn rope break. So, at one point, Nigel puts Danielson in a submission right near the ropes. Bryan literally says out loud, "I'm too good for that." And he crawls away from the ropes closer to the center of the ring, but then he starts crawling in a circle until he can roll out of the move. And then later, Danielson has Nigel in a hold, and he's screaming at Nigel, grab the ropes, Nigel. And Nigel finds his own way to escape the hold without grabbing them. So, it's a real, it's a battle of pride as much as everything else here, where it's like, look, I'm just going to make you look worse than I am, which you would think just beating them would do that, but they want more than that even. So yeah, this is a match with dueling body part work. Danielson is targeting Nigel's leg. Nigel is targeting Bryan's shoulder. It's a little weird to see a leg work story immediately after the last match had a leg work story, but
when Bryan and Nigel do it, it's different than when anyone else does it, though. You know?
Oh, definitely. I thought this was very well done. I think both guys on this night did a good job selling, especially Danielson. These two were at different points of the match were both screaming their heads off in pain in a way you don't usually hear from them. Like they were being very vocal during this match, or maybe again because of the Vegas atmosphere, I just noticed every sound that came out of their mouths.
I think that's it, honestly.
I loved how Bryan used Nigel's injured leg for cutoffs. Like there's a moment where Bryan is hitting Nigel over and over again, and Nigel's trying to rise to his feet and almost hulk up. And then rather than face that, Bryan just immediately grabs Nigel's leg, takes him back to the mat, and grabs a hold. And you know, I love those little cutoffs like that. Or later, Nigel is going for the rebound lariat, and as Nigel bounces off the ropes and runs toward him, Bryan hits a drop kick to the injured leg to block it. So again, I love stuff like that because it connects limb work to the rest of the match, where so many wrestlers treat limb work as this thing that you do at the start of the match and you never do it again. Maybe your opponent sells it, maybe he doesn't, maybe you hook a submission on at the finish, maybe you don't. But otherwise, like the limb work is just kind of a time killing thing at the start of the match. You know, one you do it for a few minutes at the start of the match and you just focus on it intently, and then once you're done that section, you never think about it again. I like that in this match, Bryan uses like Nigel's injured leg almost as a get out of jail free card throughout the match, where there's different times in this match where he's in trouble. He's like, well, fuck, I'll just hit you. I'll just grab your leg again because I know that'll just change the momentum. And it does. And I love, you know, again, simple stuff that separates guys like Bryan from everyone else, where you can thread stuff in and make it more meaningful. But what this match is most of all, I would say, is it's a grappling war. I would say the first maybe 15 minutes of this 20-minute match are on the mat, and only then do they start going to other things. Part of that might be Nigel's coming into this match with an injured arm, and so, you know, going on, spending so much of the time on the mat's probably easier for him. But that means the work of this match is a little more 2006 Bryan than 2007 Bryan, and we've been really loving 2007 Bryan lately. But any Bryan is great Bryan. So I really enjoyed this. He is so good at being vicious in mat work, doing things that are, I would describe as legal yet feel mean. Like it's like, oh, he's not being the way he's like twerking this way on a limb or just being kind of a jerk. Like it's not against the rules, but man, you're an asshole. And
did you just say twerking on a limb?
I wanted to say working, then I wanted to say twerking, and then I just combined them. And I thought I invented a new word, and then I realized in my horror, no, I used an existing word, a very wrong word for the situation.
If Bryan comes back, and then I just hope that he, you know, maybe he hasn't been working out as much. Maybe there's a little more junk in the trunk, and maybe he could do some twerking on a limb.
He did do like the gyrations a couple of times before the Indian Deathlock, so
That's
you know
right.
it's within him to do. So
Yes,
and so yeah, on the other end, I would say Bryan is also, when he's on defense, he's so good at fighting to prevent holds from being locked on. Like he's really good at selling a struggle where he makes you earn putting the hold on, where he's like going there, and he's like, you know, really selling like, I'm trying to get you from grabbing whatever limb you're going after, and you're gonna have to really get it from me. This match isn't going to be for everyone because it is more mat-based. It has, I would say, the fewest fireworks of any of their matches, but does really have its own unique tone and style to it. And after having so many matches together, I think that anytime you can have a match that's like your eighth, ninth, whatever match together that we've seen, and it feels different from the rest, I feel like that's a big accomplishment to itself. Bryan even breaks out a figure four in this match, which I can't remember seeing him do. You can tell he doesn't do a figure four often because it's not a great looking figure four. It's kind of ugly, but it was still neat to see him do that. But some people find the flaw in this match to be the pace of the first 15, but I actually felt like the whole 5 minutes that were more actiony, they were very enjoyable, but I felt like that's where I disliked the pace, because I felt like they didn't really pace them great to the time limit stoppage, because sometimes it felt like they could have been a bit more urgent as they got closer to the time limit. And while they reached the time limit at a moment where Nigel was about to hit the Tower of London on Danielson, it didn't feel like, oh, we're reaching the time limit in a really dramatic moment just when someone's about to lose. Because let's face it, how many times does someone lose to the first Tower of London these days to Nigel? It still felt, the way they were working, it felt like there were still 3 to 5 minutes to go. So it wasn't one of those classic time limit, oh shit, someone was saved by the bell type things. And which makes the stoppage a little less dramatic, but you could say maybe you don't want every time to be at a dramatic moment, because that seems a little hokey at times if you do it constantly. But I would say even in the final minute, there's this weird moment where Bobby Cruz gets on the PA and announces, 1 minute left in the match. And then I would say maybe 10 to 20 seconds after that, Bryan asks the ref how much time's left. And then the ref turns to ask the timekeeper how much time is left, which made me think, oh, Bryan's about to cheat here because, he did that just to distract the ref. But nope, nothing comes of it. A guy literally just asks how much time is left 10 to 20 seconds after an announcement was made over the PA, telling you exactly how much time was left in the match. It led to nothing. It meant nothing. It was such a weird moment. But overall, I would say I think this is a Bryan and Nigel match for the completionists, in that I think if you've seen a lot of their matches, you will enjoy this as a change of pace from the rest of their matches and a different chapter of their feud. But this wouldn't be the Nigel Bryan match that I'd recommend someone watch third, second, or even third in their series. This is one you watch after you've seen most of the other matches they've done together. This isn't the core curriculum of Bryan Nigel. This is the advanced studies, but I would still put this as like a low, very good. Like, I definitely enjoyed watching this.
Yeah, I'd say this is the match of the night, most likely. And it was a lot. I mean, if you love Bryan Danielson and Nigel McGuinness and their chemistry together, like this match is very fun to watch. If you like Bryan Danielson, because he takes a 20-minute draw and he makes almost the entire thing on the mat. And by even late in the match, he's busting out holds that are unique and feels like he might have made them up on the fly. And he's doing the figure four. And, like you said, there's the early spots where they're refusing to grab the ropes and all that stuff. And it's just a lot of fun. They're just really good at wrestling each other. And it's funny because it's like they work very well and they're clearly working hard, but you could also tell this isn't the match they would have on the A show. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But even when they're having a quote night off, they're still having just such a fantastic match because they're so good at wrestling each other that it's kind of fun to watch. Like, it's a lower impact version of what they do together, and it's still great. Not great by the pantheon of Bryan Danielson, Nigel McGuinness matches, but just like great in terms of like they're great professional wrestlers. Danielson in particular stands out here more than Nigel does, but Nigel definitely held his own too. You mentioned the announcers being loose. Like during this match, they joke about the reward for winning the tournament, which is a title shot, and they muse about what would happen if Nigel won. Like, would he have to wrestle himself? Would he just have the night off? In other words, it's not really logical for Nigel to be in this tournament, right? That's what they were kind of trying to say without saying it.
Yeah, because they kind of leave that hanging in the air, right? Like, it's the question when you hear them banter like that is, well, why would Nigel even be booked in this tournament? And they don't answer that.
Yeah, exactly. Also, to the point about hearing everything the crowd says, at one point Danielson has Nigel in a bow and arrow, and the ref says, "Do you give up?" And some completely random person, very matter of factly, goes, "Yes, he gives up." And I thought that was just very funny, like just such a random thing to hear. Like, just like, why was I able to hear that? I should not have been able to hear him say that. I'm sure this person was not even trying to be heard when he said that. Which I thought was funny. I'm trying to remember. Can you think of other examples of where Danielson does the Muda lock? Because I thought he did a very good one in this match, and I'm sure he's done it, but I can't think of too many matches where he does it.
Even like the one I mentioned, the figure four. I bet you there's another show where he's done the figure four, but it does feel like this match was like, to what you just said, like 2 or 3 different moves where he's like, I'm going to bring out the deep cuts. The thing I do like once every couple years. I
feel like he did a Mudalock-esque move in like some of those early ROH matches against like Loki, where he does like a Mudalock, but also kind of into a chicken wing kind of thing. I seem to recall him doing, but not so much a traditional Mudalock. But yeah, I just like that Danielson, even in these matches that are more forgettable, does some really cool stuff. And I enjoyed the match. I didn't even mind the awkward ending because it's like, it is slightly more realistic. Although I do wonder if Danielson asking about the time, that was a shoot or if that was part of the work. Because man, what a rookie mistake if that was a shoot. I mean, if it was a work, if it was a work, I mean.
Yeah, because when it was so loud and obvious, you were thinking it has to lead to something, and it doesn't. It leads to nothing. But I like when you were talking about how like these two guys, they were clearly, like everyone else, not giving you the match they'd give on an A show. But I think the great thing about them was, I think what they did different than what a lot of guys do is when they give their B show or C show performance, it's they do the match they would normally do on the A show and they just cut it back by like 30%. So it feels real obvious that you're seeing like, oh, I'm seeing a lesser version of what I normally see from you. Where I felt like these guys, they actually did a match that was a bit different than them, because I feel like their match at Driven did not. I'm not saying none of their other matches started out with lengthy mat work, but like their Driven match did not start out with 15 minutes of mat work. This was not a match where it's like, oh, we did what we would normally do, and then we just end it early. It was, they really made it more about the mat work and going after each other's limbs and making it more of a battle of pride of like who's better at this stuff. And I think that's the key, is you don't always have to give your A-level performance, but you should have like an A match, and like your B match should not be a reduced quality version of your A match. It should be like a different match that's easier for you to do, that aims to do something different, because then you as the fan don't feel like you're wanting. You're not like, oh, I'm getting less than the New Jersey crowd would get. You're saying, oh, I got something different than the other show. And maybe this is it. Oh yeah, go on.
It's the artistry of Bryan Danielson. Like, he's just like, I'm going to be creative in how I make this match different and maybe a little bit less of a challenging match to work, but I'm going to do it in an interesting way. Like, he just, he's a cut above other wrestlers because of that level of creativity and thoughtfulness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you, without getting spoilers, that this is the match of the night, but some people didn't agree, because Dave Meltzer wrote at the time of The Observer that according to live reports, Aries versus Delirious was said to be the best match. McGuinness versus Danielson was very good, but not the level of their pay-per-view match. So yeah, the live reports were saying, oh, that Delirious Aries match was great. Like, those fans raved about that match, apparently. And but in a way, I get it, because I think I really enjoyed the Danielson Nigel match as like an ROH pocket protector nerd who's seen all of their matches. Like, oh, I like the deviations and the nuance and all that stuff. Where like if you were just there on a Friday night to see fun actiony wrestling, yeah, the Aries Delirious match was a faster pace with bigger moves in some respects. So
I would pick a different match then if I wanted the most action-packed, exciting match of the night, but we'll get to it later.
Yeah. So after the match, the crowd chat. Oh, the one thing I wanted to say about the booking. I thought the booking of this bothered me a little, where it's not bad in a vacuum, but it's the exact same move Gabe made for this tournament the year prior. Because in the 2006 Survival of the Fittest tournament, Bryan was in the process of feuding with the then world ROH champion, Samoa Joe. And so in order to not give away a finish in their feud so that they could have like the blow-off matches later on, and to protect both men, Gabe had them go to a 20-minute time limit draw in the first round of the Survival of the Fittest tournament, and eliminating them both from the tournament. The fact that 1 year later, Bryan is now feuding with a different person who is ROH World Champion in the Survival of the Fittest tournament, and Gabe makes the exact same booking with the exact same finish, it does to me speak just a little bit to him starting to burn out as a booker.
But wait. Wasn't Danielson the champion when he went to the time limit draw with Joe?
Oh, Danielson, you're right. Yeah, I screwed up. God, you're right. Holy shit, I'm stupid. How did I think that Samoa Joe was? No, you're right.
You're not stupid.
No, thank you for saving me. But still, my point's the same, man. It is Danielson not having. It's the world champion not having to lose. It's a 20-minute draw. It's the exact same thing involving Danielson 2 years in a row, especially when the announcers early in the show said all the matches on this card in the tournament came from random drawing, which seems even more ridiculous than that it just happens to end up Nigel and Bryan. But anyway, after the match, the crowd chants 5 more minutes. Nigel grabs the mic and says he wants 5 more minutes. Let's give the people what they want, which riles the crowd up even more. Danielson charges Nigel. He gets back in the ring. McGuinness takes him down, locks in the London dungeon, although they still haven't called it that yet. Bryan taps immediately, but on commentary, Dave Prazak notes, hey, the ref hasn't rang the bell or restarted the match. And then Bryan rolls out of the ring and says, well, Nigel couldn't beat me in the time limit, so he's done. So the story of this whole segment is Bryan looked like he was willing to, have 5 more minutes to extend the match, but they get into a fight before the ref can even start it. And once it becomes clear that Nigel's going to have a leg up on him, Bryan changes his mind, chicken shits, which you've talked about this recently, Matt, how Bryan's character's been all over the place, face and heel wise. This is another one where he comes to the ring for this match like slapping everyone's hands in the front row, like ultra babyface, and then the end of his segment on this night is him like chicken shitting out and going back on like what he seemed to agree to. So it's
Yeah,
another one of those
it's really
weird,
it's weird, definitely weird.
yeah. And that brings us to a Survival of the Fittest 2007 first round three-way match. Human Tornado defeated Shane Hagedorn and Tony Kozina in 3 minutes 27 seconds when he pinned Kozina after a DND suplex. I cannot say what DND stands for. Prazak says that as a result of Nigel and Bryan going to a draw, this previously scheduled belt has now been made into a Survival of the Fittest tournament match, which I did like that because otherwise you would say, why would these three guys be in the tournament? So I do like that they were kind of like, well, we want 6 people in the final. So, this is almost like an alternate match. This is the ROH debut for Human Tornado and the first main card appearance for Tony Kozina. Kozina wrestled Angel Dust in 2004 on ROH Afternoon Do or Die tryout card. He's also probably best known for helping train Davey Richards, which is why they all call him Coach Tony K. But as of last year, he was still wrestling regularly in Canada. I looked him up in his mid-50s in the prairies. So I looked up like what he was doing, and he wrestled so many matches for just one promotion in the prairies. I was like, "There's a promotion in the prairies that's running like almost weekly. Like what?"
Yeah, I know, it's crazy.
Crazy thing to see.
Because you don't really get that anywhere,
Yeah. Like we have a local promotion here that kind of runs a few towns on a loop, but they come here maybe once every, I don't know, 2 or 3 months or something. So yeah, and just but maybe maybe out in the prairies there's less to do, and so wrestling, maybe that's where wrestling thrives. And Tony Kozina still going in his mid-50s. But before I throw it to you, I'll just say Human Tornado had been a PWG mainstay by this point. Like he had held the PWG world title earlier in 2007. He'd hold it again in 2008. And he's yet another wrestler on this card, like TJ Perkins, like Carl Anderson, that benefits from this weekend being one where ROH ran the West Coast because he's a West Coast-based wrestler. Although ROH would like what he did on this weekend enough to book him for a show in Dayton a month after this and for a New York double shot early in 2008. So this weekend's performances did earn him at least a little bit of non-West Coast stuff. And you can, like, the local fans know him. Like, he gets a nice reaction and even a chance during his entrance. So he had a local audience here. But Matt, what'd you think about this very lengthy wrestling 3-minute match?
Yeah, I mean, it's very weird to me when ROH does this. Like, they were not short on time, like you said. What is the point of giving a 3-minute match here? Like, why not let these guys show off something? I mean, I guess it's the idea that you're not going to book them, although they do book Human Tornado some more. Not a ton of Kozina, but the one thing that stood out, Tornado got one of the bigger chants of the night so far. Kozina is short even by ROH standards. But it is mostly a Tornado showcase here, doing his corner kicks, right? He does like the corner like kicks, like, that corner like dancing kick on Hagedorn, who's lying on top of Kozina. Then he does his split kick to Hagedorn's crotch in the corner, and then tries to do it to Kozina. Kozina blocks it and sends Tornado to the floor. And it's funny, and one of the funnier moments of hearing people chants or comments when Hagedorn and Kozina are fighting, we just hear one guy repeatedly go, "Boo. Boo." Like, it was like but yeah, I mean, Kozina gets a little showcase. He does a forward roll into a springboard moonsault onto Hagedorn and Tornado, but then Tornado just sneaks up behind Kozina with a suplex where Kozina lands on his face and he gets the win. It's just like, why just do a 1999 WWF TV match length? Like, what is the point of that? I don't understand. Like, it's like, I would say this was some nice moves, but like not a match. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah, I agree completely. This was classic Gabe Sapolsky booking where, with exceptions here and there, new talent is put in a position not to shine, but to protect the card in case they don't. Because I would say 3 minutes for a three-way match, so 3 minutes to be divided between three guys, to me that is almost, like you said, it doesn't feel like a wrestling match. I would say like 3 minutes for a three-way is almost in why even book this territory? Like, if you're only going to give it that much, why even have the match?
Exactly.
And making it a three-way also feels ill-advised because it makes it this scrambly in a bad way. Like, you're never getting the best out of a new wrestler in a match like this, and you're certainly not seeing what they can offer you. Like, hey, here's a match with almost no time where you're going to have to split the focus three ways and manage an additional body in the ring at all times. Like, I'm really going to be able to learn a lot about you, in a match like that. But well, yeah, what we get here is 3 minutes of spots. And if there is something that we get to see in this match, it is Human Tornado's charisma. He loves doing the splits. He does it before the match. He does it to avoid a move. He does it to kick his opponent in the balls. I've done the splits once in my life and badly hurt myself. I did it by accident when I was a kid. I bet you I will never do the splits in the rest of my life. So I'm almost jealous of people that can. Kazina hits a nice moonsault on Tornado and Hagedorn, but overall this was messy but not boring. But like going again to what you said, it would have been way better to just give Tornado, I don't know, 8 minutes with one opponent, or if you want to be crazy, give Kazina and Tornado 12 minutes and tell them try and steal the show. And like maybe they would succeed, maybe they would fall flat on their faces, but at least you'd learn something about what these guys could offer you and add something to the show. And you get none of that here. But so yeah, I completely agree with that. With what you said. In terms of what I heard, there was a fan that yelled Ivan Putski at Tony Kazina. And I guess we should note that also Hagedorn, I think this is the first time I noticed, is now wearing an Adam Pearce style ring robe, and he's now wearing a one-armed Adam Pearce style singlet. So he's fully now, even in his gear, become the Adam Pearce mini-me. And that brings us to the semi-main event of the show. This is a non-title tag team street fight. The Age of the Fall, Jimmy Jacobs and Necro Butcher defeated the Briscoes, Jay Briscoe and Mark Briscoe, in 12 minutes, 43 seconds when Jacobs made Mark pass out in the End Times guillotine choke out of the DDT. Mark, at this point, was still recovering from the dislocated foot he suffered in a motorcycle accident. And this is what I was referring to way earlier in the podcast, where you watch this and honestly, Mark shouldn't be wrestling this match. You can see him when he has to like walk with any kind of speed. He is noticeably hobbling at points. Like he can't really even put weight on his foot. That said, he is somewhat protected here because this is a brawl that doesn't require him to do any of his usual high flying. Although he does take a table bump, that table bump does let him take the middle of the match off. So it's like, I came away from thinking there's no way they should have let Mark wrestle this, but they did. In a reckless situation, they tried to protect him somewhat. This starts with a brawl throughout the building, which isn't very far to go because, again, this building is very small and cramped with a ring in the middle. It does have a bar, though, which allows Mark to slide Jacobs along it, knocking over some glasses. This building also had an elevated stage, which was a real rarity for ROH, and they used it to their advantage because when Mark takes his table bump, it's a choke slam off the apron through a table that's not off the stage through a table that's on the floor, and that's the spot that writes him out of the match for a few minutes in the middle. And that also allows the other three wrestlers in this match to go back to the ring and turn this into a handicap match for a while, and that's a neat enough trick in a tornado tag to still be able to do a face in peril sequence and your partner coming to save you, because Jay here gets beat down 2-on-1 for a while, and eventually he makes a big comeback, and Mark recovers enough to rejoin him in the fight. But I would say for some reason the Necro Jacobs beatdown of Jay didn't really engage you. Like what they did was fine, and it wasn't slow, yet it still kind of felt low energy to me. Like when Jay makes his comeback, I felt like that's when things started to pick up, and Necro does take a couple of his trademark insane open chair bumps where he gets slammed off the top turnbuckle through an open chair, and he takes a back suplex onto an open chair, and the back of his head, where he can't tell where he's going to hit, hits the seat of the chair. And just, it's like, it's a spot where there's no safe way to take that. It's insane. We've seen a lot of Jimmy and Necro brawls over the years, and this was decent, but far from their wildest or their most exciting. Like, they were likely hampered by Mark's injury, but the end result to me is just another match on the show that's like a flat above average. Like it's a little better than absolute mediocre, but it's nothing special. It's a little more entertaining than absolute baseline, but it's nothing I want to see again. And I feel bad for saying that because this is a match where Necro takes 2 nutty bumps, but the problem is I've seen Necro take those 2 nutty bumps 500 times, but it still makes me feel guilty where like a match like that, I should never be going, it's just another okay when someone puts their body on the line to that extreme. But unfortunately, part of the Necro Butcher experience is you you grow accustomed and almost expecting him to do that in every match. Um, the booking of this match I thought was fine. It gives Age of the Fall a win over the tag champs in a non-title setting, so they can say, hey, we deserve a tag title shot. But at the same time, it protects the Briscoes because Mark can rightfully say, hey, I fought at nowhere close to 100% here. And before I throw it to you mentioned the MySpace mention earlier. During this match, Lenny Leonard says, ageofthefall.com is plastering the Age of the Fall's message, quote, throughout cyberspace. I was like, I can't remember the last time I heard someone refer to the internet as cyberspace. If Lenny had then thrown in a World Wide Web, that would have made my night. But that might have been my favorite part of the match.
Well, this is definitely one example of a match that I like better than you. Maybe like the only one on the show, but I guess we'll find out in the main event. I thought what this was a fun, if unmemorable brawl, and I thought it got over better than anything else on the show. I actually agree with you about the beatdown on Jay, the face in peril sequence. I thought that was pretty dull, and I thought that the intensity that we typically see in these matches, like the previous show that had Jay versus Necro, wasn't really there, particularly because the Briscoes were selling for so long. And I thought that the crowd brawl was pretty weak on this show. But I do think I did write also when Jay starts his comeback, things pick up a little bit. When he clotheslines Necro to the floor. Then when Necro and Mark get back in the ring and they have a chair battle and Mark starts doing the redneck kung fu, and then they start doing the really crazy chair stuff, like you mentioned, Jacob's putting Jay on a chair to set him up for a move by Necro, but Jay drops Jacob's chest first across the chair, then press slams Necro off the ropes through the open chair. Got like the biggest reaction of the night probably at that point. And then that, like you mentioned, that really sick looking double back suplex on Necro, that should have been the finish, but Jacobs makes the save. I think that probably would have been better if they made the finish. But then Necro knocking Jay off the top and then just chucking chairs at Mark's head. And yeah, obviously the chair stuff was problematic to say the least, but memorable, and the crowd was really into it. And I think by the time they got to the finish, this was a pretty enjoyable match. So not high on the list of Briscoe's brawls or Necro Butcher brawls, but like I think the most exciting match on this show to me. So yeah, I think this was all right.
And it definitely gave the fans something different than the rest of the card. Otherwise this would have been a lot of short matches and a few longer things. But it was nice that, I'm sure a lot of fans, this was like one of their core memories of the show probably. It was like, they fought all over the place. We saw a table bump, all that stuff. But that brings us to the main event. This is the Survival of the Fittest 2007 final. It's a 6-way elimination match. Chris Hero defeated Austin Aries, Claudio Castagnoli, Human Tornado, Rocky Romero, and Roderick Strong in 27:43, and this is the eliminations. Chris Hero eliminated Human Tornado via pinfall in 3 minutes 58 seconds after he hit a Hero's Welcome. Chris Hero then eliminated Rocky Romero in 13:32 after a power bombing Aries onto Romero. Chris Hero then eliminated Austin Aries via pinfall at 15:38 with a weird roll-up. Chris Hero then eliminated Roderick Strong via pinfall in 20 minutes 46 seconds after hitting a Hero's Welcome. And then Chris Hero eliminated Claudio Castagnoli via ref stoppage in 27:43 when he made Claudio pass out in the Hangman's Clutch, which, yes, that's the first time in ROH history someone has won Survival of the Fittest by getting every elimination themselves. This was not the final Survival of the Fittest match in ROH history. In fact, the promotion would run many more of these, and the gimmick has continued on even to the Tony Khan era of the promotion. But this would be the last Survival of the Fittest that Gabe Sapolsky ever booked. There would not be one of these in 2008. So this is going to be the last one of these we ever cover on Through the Years, Matt. So what'd you think about it?
Well, actually, I think after we retire the show, we're going to come back just to do Survival of the Fittest shows going into the future. I'm just 2009,
kidding. We got to do it.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. They're never very good. I guess 2004's was good. But, there were things I liked about this, definitely. I thought it had a nice story. It was long, but wasn't really boring. But it also never got that exciting. It came down to, like usually when they get to the finals, there's a pretty good one-on-one sequence. And I'd say this match had a pretty good one-on-one sequence at the end between Hero and Claudio. But leading up to it, there were things about it that I found, I don't know, WWE-esque about the booking. in ways that maybe were effective in some ways and ineffective in others. Obviously, the hero shtick, where he hides for a lot of the match, picks his spots, and is able to sneakily eliminate everybody on the show. Everybody in the match, I mean, up until he has a more challenging battle against Claudio and has to double cross Strong and whatever. Um, that was certainly like a WWE, almost like Royal Rumble type of booking. And then, of course, there was the booking of Human Tornado, which I already complained about once. They're trying to put this guy over in some way, but it basically is the equivalent of wrestler enters the Royal Rumble, hits his finishing move on everybody, and then gets eliminated. Like within like a minute.
Mhm.
It's just like, why? Why? I don't know. I mean, I know you'll talk about it later, but like, I don't understand it. Like, what's the point? What's the point of even having him in there if that's what they were going to do to him? Uh,
He doesn't trust he doesn't Gabe doesn't trust, very rarely does he trust a new wrestler. Like I don't know why, but yeah, to what Matt, before I give it back to you, Matt, I'll just say, like, when you say 1 minute, like, even though he gets eliminated 4 minutes in, you don't see him for the first 3 minutes of this match. So he gets 1 minute of ring time and that's it. And yeah, it's like, again, it almost goes back, why'd you even put him in the tournament then? Why didn't you just make this a 5-man tournament? Like, it is such a weird, like, not even dipping your toe in the water, like dipping the edge of your toe in the water booking.
yeah, I didn't remember how he was booked in this, and it bothered me. It was just like this seems ridiculous. But getting back to the match, Hero, it was shticky. He'd like sit on the stage and chant "This is awesome" while Strong and Aries were fighting, stuff like that. And I think there's something clever about it. I'm not saying it was bad booking, but it did give some WWE vibes. As far as while this was all happening, Strong and Aries had some fun sequences, and then it kind of broke down into almost like a tag team match with the No Remorse Corps getting the heat on Aries and Claudio basically being Aries' de facto tag team partner. Although he wasn't defending Aries as aggressively as an actual partner would, like coming in the ring and stuff like that. But he did get a hot tag, and it was pretty good. And then they did that thing where Aries, even though he's been getting beat down for a while, comes immediately back in and hits some drop kicks and stuff. And that's when Hero comes in and he's able to do a sneaky pinfall on Romero, where after he power bombs Aries on top of him, and then we get an Aries and Strong sequence where Hero blind tags himself in again, sneaks in with a backslide, and then Hero keeps trying to like cradle Aries, and eventually he pins him. And then we get that spot I was telling you about where Sweeney pays off Strong not to fight Hero, gives him $500, and Strong takes the money, puts it in his knee pad, and starts double teaming Claudio with Hero until eventually, after Strong hits a Gibson driver on Claudio, Hero follows behind, hits a Hero's welcome, and pins him, and then takes back the money. So he's even more dastardly than Strong in this setting. And then we get a pretty fun sequence between Claudio and Hero, but nothing that you're going to remember. Certainly nothing like the final sequences between Danielson and Aries in the first year, or Seidel and Delirious in 2006. Nothing like that. But overall, I would describe the match as entertaining. I think that it's getting over Hero in a very gimmicky way, as opposed to getting him over as a wrestler, which obviously is what they've been doing all along with him. I still have mixed feelings about it. Hero, for his part, does very well. And I would say the other wrestlers don't phone it in, but they're also not the showcase, so they don't really get the focus. I think the guy who gets to show off the most, other than Hero, is Claudio, and I think he does a good job. But certainly compared to what he did in the Race to the Top finals, this is not a very memorable match for him either. So I don't know how to rate it. I'd say it was not the least enjoyable of the Survival of the Fittest finals. I think it was more enjoyable than 2005's, but it also wasn't anything that you'd ever want to watch again.
Yeah, before I get into the match, a little more in the background because I was thinking, knowing that Gabe wanted to get rid of Survival of the Fittest in 2006, but then when word of that came out in PW Insider, fans on the message board went crazy and he brought it back. But knowing he wouldn't bring it back for 2008, I was thinking about it, and then I kind of looked over and I realized Survival of the Fittest had been like historically almost a cursed show for ROH. As I looked up like the history of it, the first one in 2004 drew 300 fans, which in itself is one of ROH's lowest attendances ever. Then the second in 2005, it drew 425 fans and was the last show ROH ran in Boston, in the Boston area for 13 months. The third in 2006 drew 375 fans and was the last show they ran in Cleveland for almost 2 years. And then here they drew maybe 300 fans, if that, in Las Vegas, and in an incredibly ill-fated West Coast expansion. So this gimmick was like a curse for the company almost. But I can't blame it all on the tournament because that first tournament in 2004, it had its venue changed around, and ROH had to scramble to rebook the show into the event room of a goddamn Ramada Inn, like with $5 tickets. ROH had been having troubles with the Boston market basically forever. They were always changing venues there, and Cleveland had never been a strong draw for them either. And like even this one in Vegas, I don't think if they had put on a different card, they would have drawn much better in Vegas, but Gabe did try and do something different with this one in a couple of respects. The first was he really shortened this match in a couple of ways. The first Survival of the Fittest was over 42 minutes long. The second was over 50. The third was 35, almost 35 minutes. This is under 28, so this is by far, the shortest they've done yet.
I just to say, I don't necessarily mind that.
No, but I will say on a card that was already kind of depleted, like it's like they were rushing through the opening matches, but they also kind of did you a short, again, they just wanted the show over with. But it was also shorter in another way where when the Survival of the Fittest elimination match got down to two people historically, it had been basically always another full singles match to like end the tournament, where in 2004, when it got to Danielson and Aries, they wrestled for another 23 minutes, which was actually longer than the rest of the match. In 2005, when it got down to Strong and Aries, they wrestled for one-on-one for almost 15 minutes. In 2006, when it got down to Seidel and Delirious, they wrestled for almost 12 more minutes. And here, when it gets down to Hero and Claudio, they wrestle for 7. So not only is the tournament final shorter on the whole than it's ever been before, it's the first one of these tournaments that doesn't treat the final 2 in the booking as like a whole separate match. It's more like, oh, it's the lengthy final elimination. And I think that second element, I agree with you that on this night, I didn't hate it being the whole match being shorter, but I did kind of wish that the Claudio Hero had more time to build, because the best Survival of the Fittest, like you mentioned earlier, is the first one, like by far. The booking of the eliminations really played well into things ROH was doing at the time, and the Aries Danielson final match at the end is great, and one of the first, and I would say the first match that really elevated Aries as a single star in ROH. The Seidel Delirious final in 2006, that's my favorite match those two guys ever had against each other in ROH. But here, to me, it didn't feel like Claudio and Hero wrestled a match. It feels like a few minutes of a match, but then they have to quickly go to their big moves and their near falls for the finish. And it's entertaining, but like compared to all those other ones, those felt like matches. This felt like, again, like, well, we got to wrap it up and we got a little bit of time, but not a ton of time. And I think that kind of doesn't help. It makes this turn already that doesn't have a lot of like selling points have one less selling point. But the other thing Gabe does is, like I said earlier, he has Hero, one guy, score every elimination, and I think that does work. I think it's slightly gutsy. It's not incredibly gutsy, but when you consider that usually in these big elimination matches, bookers tend to like to spread the wealth with the eliminations. They like a lot of people to score an elimination because that only one person can win the match, but you kind of go, well, I'll give other guys a little bit of shine because this guy can eliminate this guy, and this guy can eliminate this guy. And so for Gabe to kind of not deny himself that crutch and be like, we're going to push Hero hard here. We're going to make that the story of the match. He's going to get every single elimination. No one else is going to get anything. I was like, okay, that's a unique choice that you have not done before. So it's only fair if I complained about Gabe repeating booking earlier. He's doing something completely different here than he's done before. And this match does have my favorite moment of the entire show that you talked about, where when it gets down to Hero Strong and Claudio, when Sweeney bribes Roddy with $500 to team up with Hero against Claudio, and Roddy shoves the money in his knee pad, and then Hero turns on him later to eliminate him, and Hero fishes the money out of his ring gear. Like, to me, that is so old school in the best way. Like, that a wrestler is so money hungry that they're like, I'm getting that $500 back. Like, it's not enough that I've stabbed you in the back and eliminated you. We want that money. But the rest of the matches, I don't know. I agree with you about the human tornado stuff. I think he had the potential to add a really interesting, fresh element to a match that was otherwise filled with 5 guys who had all had long histories in ROH already. But instead, yeah, he gets 1 minute of ring time, gets eliminated 4 minutes in. Unfortunately, in that 1 minute of ring time, he botches Rana to the floor in that minute, but he also does a big dive into the crowd, and he and Aries does the heat-seeking missile to the crowd. So yeah, those were the only 2 dives you got to see the entire show, because of how cramped everything was. From there, yeah, we get the story of the match, which you laid out, which was for the first 2 eliminations, which is, Hero sits on the stage the entire time, doesn't participate except to run down to the ring and blind tag himself in and sneak in. And that's the story of the whole match. Is every elimination other than the final one is Hero being sneaky. It's him blind tagging and pinning someone behind someone's back when they had already done all the work, or it's him turning on Roddy when he thinks he's working with Hero because he just took the payoff. And we even get that part in the middle where Aries and Claudio team up and treat Roddy against Roddy and Rocky. They basically treat it like a tag match. Like so many of these elimination matches, the wrestlers just decide it'd be easier if we treat it like a tag match. Again, all that's decent. There is a part I thought was weird where Hero sneaks up on Aries to pin him, but it's weird because he sneaks up on him, on a blind tag. He does a backslide out of nowhere, but Aries kicks out, so now the element of surprise is gone, and then they awkwardly transition into this weird roll up near the ropes where the camera angle doesn't even allow us to see if Hero cheated or not by grabbing the ropes, and that works. And it was just a really strange, hinky way to do an elimination where if it's by surprise, which is the whole point of all these Hero eliminations, it should be the first thing he does. Instead, it's like, no, we're going to get a kick out here, and then we're going to do a worse-looking thing in a second and do it on that one. And then the other weird thing in this match, and this is what I kind of was alluding to earlier, was at the end of Claudio and Davey, Claudio starts to sell his neck at the very end of that match. When he makes his entrance for this match, the finals, he's selling his neck. He's grabbing it the way as he walks to the ring. But he doesn't really sell his neck. I mean, maybe I missed something at all during the match itself. Even when most of Hero's offense is targeting the neck, and in theory, Claudio's neck injury, you would think that the reason why they're having Claudio do a neck injury is to give him an out for losing clean to Hero, but yet he doesn't really sell it. Like he sold his leg in the Davey match way, way better than he sold his neck in this match, where, again, you would think the point is, sell your neck real hard so you can say, well, yeah, I lost, but I kind of had a weakness going into this match. But overall, I would say most of the work in this match was, I enjoyed it, but it was not close to special. But there were enough fun moments in the booking and otherwise that I'd rate this match as good overall. It's like the second best match of the night. But also, it didn't feel as substantial as every other Survival of the Fittest final that we've seen so far. And it doesn't really earn the build-up of all those short tournament matches and the whole show being built around this gimmick. Like, this is a card that felt pretty thin, where so many of the matches were short. And usually when you do a tournament where so many of the first round matches are short, you're like, well, they're doing that because the final, they're going to give it a lot of time and they're going to go for broke. And they did give it time and they did give an honest effort, but it wasn't like, well, that makes up for all the short nothing first round matches. It was like, they kind of did a B level effort after a lot of C level efforts. So, it just, the whole show just has a vibe to it. Claudio does do the Alex Wright dance during this match, which I really liked. So, again, I feel like a lot of my favorite things on this show were like the most incidental things on it. But after the win, Chris Hero has Bobby Cruz announce that Chris Hero is going to Disney World and he's leaving this stinkhole of Las Vegas. Hero literally holds his nose as he goes to the back. And then we immediately cut to Hero and Sweeney outside the building on the Vegas Strip. Hero says he's the fittest man in all of Ring of Honor. Claudio Castagnoli isn't. Hero points to the Statue of Liberty replica across the street at the New York Casino. And he Or I think he earnestly, like in his character earnestly asks, he goes, "When do they move that to Vegas?" and, and Sweetie's like, "Well, we'll get that for your backyard." Blah, blah, blah. And Hero, then this is what you talked about earlier. Hero asks, which I'm pretty sure are strangers, if they want an autograph. And one guy's like, "Well, who are you?" And Sweetie tells him, he's the best professional wrestler in the world. And the guy does not believe it.
He literally says, "I don't believe you."
And then another guy drinking a beer walks up and he puts his arm around Hero and says, "This guy's the man." And then the segment ends with Hero and Sweeney starting a "Chris is awesome" chant, but it's to nobody because the two strangers were already so bored they had already walked away. So it's like there's no one around them, and it's just so again, I mean, it works in a way because they're heels, but they could not look like bigger geeks and nobodies than in this segment, where like these people were so nonplussed to be a part of this and didn't know who they are.
You're definitely right about that.
And that's the way the show ends. So Matt, this is an interesting one to give the Matt F trophy to, because there were some good performances, but man, it's a weird night for the trophy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be boring. And I'm going to say Bryan Danielson because, like I mentioned, he just gave such a cool, interesting performance. And, yeah, I mean, I do think it's a boring choice because, obviously, Bryan Danielson, right? But, like,
yeah.
I don't know. He gave the best performance on the show, and he had the best match. And he's maybe the one thing I would recommend anyone go back and watch from this show is the match that he put together and the performance he gave. So it just seems like the only choice.
Yeah, and to be fair to you, I feel like I've done this long enough with you and know you well enough that I feel like if someone else was even close to Bryan's level on this night, just to be different, you would have picked that person. Even if Bryan was a 9 out of 10, someone else was an 8, you probably would have given it to the 8. But like, yeah, I don't think there's anyone else even close, so it would be kind of crazy to be like, well, Hugh and Tornado tried hard for a couple of minutes.
Exactly.
Be like, no, you can't do that. Like Bryan was clearly the guy that had the opportunity and the effort to put in the effort to do something really good here on this night. So that is the show. And boy, what I don't know if this is the worst show we've ever seen, because it was not.
Trevor, I'm going to say something that you might find controversial. I would take this show over several of those late 2006 shows. I thought it was more entertaining than those shows. Like, I mean, I just, and the atmosphere was less dire, I think. So I'm not saying all of them, but I really did not like that late 2006 period. So I do not think this was the worst show we've ever seen, or close to it, honestly.
It does not have the downer energy of that era, so I completely get what you're saying. And this is not the worst show we've seen, but I will say that this show does have an energy I don't think we've really seen much from Ring of Honor, because we see a lot of Ring of Honor B shows, but this felt like, I can't remember a show more up and down the card that just felt like guys were kind of sleepwalking through it.
I think that is fair. I think definitely this is probably one of the slightest ROH shows we've ever watched.
Yeah, that's as always. You are perfect at like taking something I ramble and then condensing it down to a much finer, better point, and that's a great example of that. But yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a thin show. It's slight, and normally even on B shows, you can tell some guys may be giving 80%, but this real, again, I think I said this earlier. This felt like a show where guys were just going. They showed up. There wasn't hardly anyone there. They're probably looking forward to what at the time they hope would be a big show at the convention in a couple of days. And they were probably like, let's just get through the show. Let's try not to get hurt. Let's do enough to, make them feel like they didn't waste their money on a ticket, but let's, not stick around. And I don't remember any other ROH show where I got that much of that kind of vibe from it. So
I agree.
Overall, yeah, like the Aries, I mean, the one match I would say, if you were a Nigel Danielson completist, I think this is a match that's worth visiting. Like I said, after you've watched a bunch of their other ones, I think it's different enough that you'd be like, oh, this is another neat side of what they can do together. But yeah, otherwise, very skippable but not painful show. And yeah, that brings us to plug. So ThROH@gmail.com is the email address. That's THROH, the way it is on your podcast app. At Trevor Dame on Twitter, at MayorMGF on Twitter for Matt. We're on Blue Sky under similar names. I'm sure you can find them. Next time on the show, we'll be covering Chaos at the Cow Palace. Yeah, that is a show where that show's a little bit shorter than this one, but I bet you it's going to be a longer episode because the stories of things that happened on that convention it is one of the biggest shit shows, and Ring of Honor is just a small part of it. But I also forgot, just doing my research, that's the show where Lex Luger has his spinal stroke and becomes a paraplegic. Like, everything
Wow.
bad in the world happens on that
Wow.
weekend.
Wow.
It is crazy. So there will be probably like a good 40 minutes of stories and then like an hour and 40-minute show review. So enjoy that. That should be honestly a lot of fun. It'll probably be an episode unlike anything we'll do before or since. And so yeah, until then, till next time, have a good time. Have a great time.